Whenever I think of labels, right, I always say this to people. I'm like, look, labels very quickly and often do become mindsets. And those mindsets tend to turn into these templates that it's really easy to slate ourselves into. Think about what being qualified means to you. What does that mean? Does that mean a degree? Does that mean an education? Does that mean a certain certification? Like, what is qualified? By having faith in something outside of yourself, you're not absolving yourself of the responsibility to do what you need to do for yourself. What you're doing is you're letting go of the fear that it might not work.
Greetings all, welcome back to Living Once Twice, the place where we rewrite narratives, reinvent ourselves, and reimagine our lives. Thank you for tuning into today's episode. Before we dive in, please be sure to subscribe, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, also check out the YouTube channel, and give us a follow at Living Once Twice, where you can view more great content, including content on all of our amazing guests, including the guest that I'm going to bring on today, which is Sara Mirza. Sara is an educator, facilitator, and professional development coach, an organizational development consultant with over 10 years experience, previously leading HR and people and culture functions in various organizations across different sectors. Sara launched her own coaching and consulting business, Avra Coaching, as a Gallup certified strengths coach, Enneagram accredited practitioner, and design your life coach. Sara incorporates the use of these tools and frameworks to help our clients become more aware of their natural talents, enhance employee and team engagement, navigate change management, and design their lives and careers with more intentionality, mindfulness, and alignment. In addition to her work as a coach and consultant to teams, individuals, and organizations, Sara serves as a psychology instructor as she holds a BA and MA in psychology with a specialization in counseling, resilience coaching, and hypnotherapy. The one and only Sara, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, Justin. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing amazing, Sara. I am super excited to have this opportunity to dive into your story, to get to share with the audience so much of the great insight that you have around a lot of different topic areas. But I always like to give folks a little context. As we met about 3 years ago, random high stranger moment. Then we ended up connecting and finding out through like 6 degrees of separation that we connected. We knew some folks. And I've just been really grateful to get a front row seat to just watching you unlock all of these different levels of life that we're going to talk about in a little bit, because the way that you break it down, you make it seem that like all of this is accessible to everyone. You don't have to have some superpower. You don't have to be anything outside of just being the normal, ordinary human beings that we are to have access to peace, to joy, to freedom, and designing the life that we want. And so I'm really grateful for you in advance of your insight and your time.
Yeah, of course. I'm excited. I'm excited for this conversation. Thank you.
So let's dive in, because there's a lot, Sara, that I want to talk about. Everything from how do we overcome the battlefield of our mind, also talking about in an organizational space, how do we have difficult conversations, as well as how do we step into the unknown with faith and not giving up on ourselves and our journeys. But where I want to start is your journey. And for folks out there listening, could you share more about just your background and what was your journey like into the real world, especially when it came to you discovering that you no longer wanted to go the conventional route and you wanted to pursue a different path?
Yeah, for sure. Well, you gave such a beautiful introduction of me, and thank you so much for doing all of that wonderful research and introducing me with so much detail. I'll start a little bit before I got to what you just shared. So I am Pakistani. I was born in Pakistan. My family immigrated here when I was about 2, and we came to California. I've grown up in California in the Bay Area. I went to Berkeley for my bachelor's, got my master's at Golden Gate University, both in psychology and counseling. I always knew I was really, really intrigued by people and human behavior and what motivates people specifically. And then I kind of took this I call it like my scenic route back to what I started doing after my master's, which was counseling and coaching, career counseling specifically. So I live in Emeryville. I have spent the majority of my career in HR in various roles at various very cool companies. And I'm so thankful I got the experience to do lots of cool things. I've also kind of had one foot in like between HR and education. I've had like a foot in each boat for a long time. And that was kind of interesting to kind of explore both of those aspects of who I am, as like an HR professional and then also as an educator. So that's a little bit about my background. And then what was the second part of your question?
So I think it's beautiful what you shared here of how you went the journey, you went to school, you got your degree, you started to embark on this career path. But then what was the turning point for you when you decided, okay, after 10 years, I've conquered the corporate world, that you wanted to go a different path? Because most people would be like, wow, you've moved up the chain.
Mhm.
Wasn't that success fulfilling to you? Or but what was the tug that led you in a different direction?
Yeah, yeah. So that was the second part of the question. What made me leave my nice corporate job that everyone thinks like that's where you need to be? Yeah. Well, Justin, I think the past 5 years have been very transformative for me. I've had to be really honest with myself in terms of what I really want and what the world has taught me to want. And I think I got to a position and a place where I was like, oh, this is nice, right? This is great. And I'm very much a rose colored glasses on type person, so I'm like, everything's fine, everything's totally fine, I'm totally happy. And then like this thing kept kind of pulling at me where it was like, well, you're not really doing the things that you want to be doing on a day-to-day basis. Like you're not working with people. I was designing like programs and policies for a company that they needed HR, and they needed someone to do this very operational work, very foundational, like set up the rules and set up the processes by which people get things done in the workplace, which is all so important. But it's not who Sara is. And I'm more of a let's connect and talk about your future, and let's talk about how we can unlock your potential. And I'm that person. And so that's what was kind of like tugging at me for a while. And so that's what made me make the leap.
I think that's going to speak to so many people. I want to just amplify something you said. It was about like what you like versus what the world taught you to like. So do you mind sharing a little bit more about like what did the world teach you to like, and what kind of like values from the outside world were you kind of accumulating and maybe chasing after that weren't really authentic to you?
Yeah, yeah. That's a great question, Justin. I think it goes back to like what we have been taught is success, and our relationship with money and stability and predictability in our lives. Like we want predictability, and the world tells us, hey, success is like a certain title or a certain dollar amount, or if you work at a really fancy company, like that's success. Or if you move from like this level in your job and you can't like take a sidestep, you move to the next level up, like that's, you have to show that constant progression, and that's what success is. And if you get to post a nice little title on LinkedIn, like that's success. So I think like it's just kind of it's understanding that, and then really defining what success is for you personally.
That speaks to you saying like, okay, you started to and through this 5 years journey question and kind of explore and tap into that. So
Mhm.
can you kind of take us through then what were those like early days of the transition like what did you have to overcome? Because I know for one, it's not an overnight thing to go from corporate to then launching your own career
Mhm.
and your own coaching practice. So what were the some of the steps you took? What were some of the obstacles that you maybe had to overcome in your journey in that transition of then beginning and creating your own practice that was really in more alignment to who you were?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing was a belief in myself, right? Because I think it's so interesting how much of our feeling of how important and how successful we are comes from something outside of us. And so I wasn't going to be the head of HR somewhere anymore. And so then I was like, well, who am I? I'm going to be a coach. Well, then what qualifies me to be a coach? And I think it's that belief. It's like seeing myself as someone who can go out there and start a business a successful business and grow a successful business and navigate those challenges. And I think it's that confidence. Yeah. So I think that's one of those things. I think my relationship with, like I mentioned, success and money, again, with the predictability and just knowing that you're getting a certain paycheck and it's going to pay for your life versus being a business owner and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to put stuff out there and people might like it. They might not like it. Some people might want to work with me. Some people might not want to work with me. And being able to distance yourself from that outcome a little bit and just go, okay, this is what I want to do. And I'm going to have faith and I'm going to have trust that things will work out. So that I'm talking about this like a bullet point list, but it's so much work when you like dig into it, right? It's so much kind of looking at how we've been conditioned and then unconditioning that a little bit. And then finally, I think the last thing is that tactical thing. Like starting a business is very much like, in terms of overcoming the challenges, for me personally, I told myself for a long time, oh, well, I shouldn't do that because, like, for example, I don't know how to build a website. And so I like let that, and now I call them my excuses, but that was my back in the day, right? I was like, oh yeah, that's a totally legitimate reason for me to not start this because like I don't know how to build a website and I don't understand the legalities of like making contracts and how to actually establish a business and so now I call them my excuses, but back then they sounded like very logical, solid reasons for why I shouldn't do this.
Sarah, I want to amplify something here because you talked about some of these labels or these identities that you had, and you just were referring to one, and then you kind of summed it up looking back at it like, oh, that was just an excuse. Like I told myself I don't have this skill set, so I can't make this leap or I can't make this move. I can't start my own business. And so I want to talk about a little bit about this like battlefield of the mind because a lot of us, we put ourselves in this self-made prison because we put these labels on ourselves that do hold us back. And it could be anything. It could be the gamut of things of imposter syndrome. I'm first generation. No one in my family has done this, so I can't do it. Things of like that security. I guess I would like to hear you speak more about like why do we do that to ourselves? We put ourselves in the prison when the things that we want, we're the ones that hold the key and are locking ourselves in. So like anything you want to share, especially with your psychology background of why we tend to trip ourselves up on identities and labels and sometimes how that can be counterintuitive to like us creating the life that we dream of and that we desire.
Yeah, I think this is such an important topic, and I think you and I can talk about this for days. But where to start? Okay, so you said labels, and whenever I think of labels, right, I always say this to people. I'm like, look, labels very quickly and often do become mindsets. And those mindsets tend to turn into these templates that it's really easy to slate ourselves into. And it's easy to apply those templates to our lives, right? And so when you think about what you're talking about is like these limiting beliefs, these like I can't do this because, or I'm not able to do this because, right? The way I think about limiting beliefs, Justin, is at some point in your life, the reason why you have this limiting belief, at some point in your life, it served you and it served you very well. And so I almost like for my clients, I like to turn it around and I go, okay, well, where did this work for you? And let's talk about who you were back then. So that's pretty simple. It's like, okay, I believe this thing and I've believed it since this point in my life. And back then I was this person. And then it's kind of like working through, okay, well, are you that person today? And who are you trying to become? So it's like looking at these different versions of you and how you're growing and evolving. And these limiting beliefs really are just the things that we hold on to from our past because it's really comforting. Like limiting beliefs are so comforting. It's like, well, that was who I was once and I believed this thing and it's a part of my identity. And it's just being comfortable. It's about being comfortable stepping into your next identity, the next evolution of who you are and what you're here to do, right? And so it's almost like talking about them as if they're like nice. They're these good things that we used to have that was really good for us at one point. They no longer serve you. They no longer serve the person you want to become. So then how do you then kindly, with a lot of care for yourself and who you were and where you came from, how do you nicely let that go?
This resonates so much with me because I can relate, whether it's starting a podcast or
Mhm.
coaching or whatever it might be, of being like, no, that's not me. That's not what I do. But I hear what you're saying of like, we cling to these beliefs that, and it's so important what you say, like they served us once upon a time, but they're no longer doing us any good. And so we have to go through this process of like letting them go, figuring out how to replace those beliefs, which I think can be so difficult for us to do because we cling to something you talked about earlier too, that familiarity, that predictability. And I
Mhm.
think one of the other beliefs that I wanted to get your thoughts on here too is for some people, when they hear your story of going into, say, a coaching practice or starting your own business, they can also cling to the story of, well, like, where am I going to get the energy to do that? And I want to bring up a quote that I've heard from you, which is, you often feel tired, not because you've done too much, but because you've done too little of what sparks a light in you. So can you speak more about like that quote and what practical steps you could see a person take who's saying, well, wait, I don't even have the energy to like figure out what I like to do. How do I reignite that fire if it's kind of been diminished um, because of, again, they've been chasing things that really don't speak to their true passions or their true values or true interests.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's all about energy management, right? So we're so used to thinking
Mm-hmm.
time management. Like, here's my day, here's how I structure it, here's what all the things I have to get done. And one of the ways that I've kind of transformed for myself is thinking about how do I manage my energy? What are points in time? And I do this with my clients where I'll ask them, I'm like, throughout your week, what are the times when you walk away from something and you feel good, you feel energized, you're like, wow, like that was a good feeling, and now I can go like do something that maybe I don't love doing. Like for me it's like cleaning my house or like washing my dishes. And I'm like I have the energy to do the stuff now that I don't love doing. And so those are the moments that give us energy, and a lot of times people don't know the answer, and that's okay. We are not taught to think about our energy, and so we don't think about moments where we feel really energized and really excited versus moments where we're just drained. And the thing about those moments that we're like, if you're in a job that you don't love, you're going to feel drained at the end of the day. And that's the only time you're going to have the mental bandwidth to actually think about what's going on. And that's not a good space to operate from. And so, one of the things I would suggest anybody that wants to start kind of observing their energy in this way is start to notice, just for a week, like make the intention to notice when you have like this extra burst of energy. What did you just do, right? And in terms of how do we reignite that spark, that other part of your question. So for me, I've always loved teaching, and so when I made this transition over to corporate and had this job, and it really did come from like a life event. I needed a different kind of job, and I needed to take care of, myself in a different way. And so I left teaching and I went over to corporate. And I realized I was in this job that I didn't love, but I was like, okay, like it pays really well. The company's great. I don't love the job, but I have to stick this out. I have to do this, right? And then I got to volunteer for an educational nonprofit and I started teaching. And it's funny because you said, where do people get the energy? What, like, people ask me all the time, like, they're like, why do you have so much energy? Why do you have so much ability to like do all these things? And it's truly because I do things that make me really, really happy. So then I have the energy to be able to do the things that aren't that exciting for me. And that's what I started noticing around 2013, 20 or 2014 when I started with this organization. I was like, oh, like I get up on Saturday mornings and I drive from Fremont, California to San Francisco, and I go and I teach for, a little bit of my morning, 2 hours, and I come back. But I feel so good on Saturdays. And then you kind of step back and you zoom out and you go, oh, these are the days where I feel really, really good. I feel positive. I can get stuff done. I can get all this other stuff done. And versus during my week when I'd come home and I'd be like, okay, I just want to sit in front of the TV. And so it's like noticing that difference. And then in terms of reigniting that spark, I would just say if you don't have anything that you're doing that's giving you energy, then go figure out what it is that, you know, lights that fire, or whatever, whatever you enjoy, and go try doing it for like once a week, twice a week, and then start to notice how you feel about your energy.
I like how you're giving us some like tactical ways to go about this, because I can hear some people saying, well, I can't just like leave my job right away. I've got responsibilities, I've got kids,
Mhm.
whatever it might be. But you just saying like, okay, well, take some time with yourself, and maybe in some of the free time that you can carve out, like dip your toe into different things,
Mhm.
and or think back to what in the past did give you energy. And for you, you talked about like teaching
Mhm.
really reignited your fire.
Mhm.
So helping people to kind of like get back to who they were, or be able to identify these values again, and start to then use them as like building blocks to build some momentum going forward. But to someone who might be saying like, okay, that sounds good, but like, um, yes, I've got this really nice job, I'm making really great money. I don't know if I could replace my salary, for example, with the thing that I'm really passionate about doing, Sara. Like, are
Mm.
you what would you offer to them about that, if that's their hesitation of like, I know that everyone says you should chase your passions and it takes care of itself, but like seeing that in their mind practically is really kind of like a little bit of a hump that they're having some difficulty getting over.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's a really tough one. So, this involves, so there's a short answer, and there's a much deeper, I think, answer that requires a lot more work. And my short answer is usually I'll go, okay, well, then it sounds like that amount of money that you're making is worth the amount of stress that you're taking on from that job, or that unhappiness, or that, whatever, that unfulfillment. And if that's fine, that's fine. That works for you, if you're making a lot of money, and it's worth it. It's worth you giving up whatever you're giving up. Like, let's put names on this, right? Tell me what you're giving up, Justin. Are you giving up your joy? Are you giving up a sense of freedom, of time? Are you, what are you giving up? And then think about, is that amount of money worth it? And if it is, that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But if it's not worth it and you're still dealing with that, then I mean, I personally can say, and I know lots of people who have gone through this, and I've gone through this, is we need to explore our relationship with money, and what money means, and where it comes from, and who deserves it and who doesn't deserve it. And so there's so much there, but I think exploring your relationship with stability, with finances, I think that's really important. That's a big part of this.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head, though, too, of talking about what's the cost. Because there is a cost that you give up, and we all know that. And so many folks who've gone the journey of working in corporate or whatever it might be, earning the money,
Mhm.
it feels great to have the financial stability, but you're right, there is a cost. And sometimes the cost is your health. And we know that those blows to your mental health, your emotional health, those are the toughest to come back from, to bounce back from. And that maybe isn't the quite the trade-off that folks want to give up when they really deeply think about it. So, what are your thoughts too on like, you don't necessarily need to quit your day job? Like, I feel like sometimes we're also we get wrapped up in this misconception that to truly design and enjoy a life that you want, you have to give up your day job completely. But you gave an example that, hey, sometimes it could be what you do on the side, it could be what you volunteer and do. So do you ever find yourself having to help rewrite that narrative that people have, that they necessarily need to give it all up, but maybe there's a little bit of other ways that they could create some balance for themselves?
Yeah, yeah. I actually advise against giving it all up right away, immediately. I don't think that's healthy, because I don't think we fully know what we want and what we love until we try it, right? And so something might seem like, oh, like that would be so cool. I would love to do that. And I have clients who are like, oh, I really, I think that's the thing that seems so great. And when I ask them what about it seems really great, they'll tell it to me from the perspective of someone who's on the outside looking into that job or that career. And I'm like, okay, have you tried it? And then sometimes they'll go try something, or they'll do an informational interview, and they're like, yeah, I don't think that's great. That I don't know if I could do those parts of it. So I don't recommend, like, ever leaving something, abandoning like a full-time job to go, find your passion or figure out your passion. I actually do recommend testing it out. So to your point, like, figure out ways that you can do it, maybe do it on the side, do it as a side gig for a while. I did coaching for a long time as a side gig, and all the money I made from my side gig went into savings, because that was my motivation of, like, one day I'm going to do this full time, and I'm going to need this money to, like, support my lifestyle full time when I do this work full time. And so I always recommend go try it out. And whether that's through like a volunteer position, or it's through, just starting a side gig, a lot of people do that. Whatever it might be, take that first step to try it out.
Yeah, no, something you made so clear here. It's like you don't have to give it all up. You don't have to do it to like burn all the ships at sea. Like you truly can be strategic. And I know for you it was a journey to getting to this point. And sometimes people they only see the finished product, but they
Mhm.
don't necessarily get to see the journey. So it's also speaks to that other suggestion you offered about like talk to people who are doing the thing that you're interested in doing, and they can really give you the good, the bad, the in between to
Mhm.
help you have more insight of whether or not like that is indeed the journey that you want to take on.
Mhm.
I want to go back to mindset real quick though, because Sarah, with you going into coaching, I think one of the things I heard you say, and you can correct me on this, was like, did you struggle with feeling confident in yourself in being a coach, or feeling quote unquote qualified to be a coach when you first started? Was that like one of those limiting beliefs about yourself that you had to rewrite? Because I could hear people saying like, well, I don't have the degrees,
Mhm.
I'm only 25,
Yeah.
like, but this is an area of passion that they want to help and serve people in these different ways. So like, hey, how did you like navigate any of that narrative in your own head, and how would you help someone else who struggles with feeling like they're not qualified to be a coach?
Hmm. Yeah. I would suggest this is such an important question. It's such a good one. I think this gets at like our imposter syndrome, right? Like, the thing I would suggest to those people that are wondering is think about what being qualified means to you. What does that mean? Does that mean a degree? Does that mean an education? Does that mean a certain certification? Like, what is qualified? Because one of the things I noticed about myself, and I have, my inner critic that was like, I mean, I had a master's degree in counseling, and I was like, I wonder if I can be a career coach full time. I'm sitting here with a master's degree in counseling, wondering
Yeah,
if I can be a career coach,
that's
right? It
crazy.
sounds
Wow.
ridiculous, but you know why? Because there's coaching certifications out there. You can go become a life coach from like 12 different places. You can go get a coaching certification. You can do all these things. The world is filled with opportunities to go learn and continue your education and continue to add, letters after your name or whatever that may be. But where does qualification actually come from? Where does that actually come from? And if you're trying to go become an engineer, yeah, you should probably know something about engineering, right? And yeah, if you're trying to go become a coach, you should know what coaching is and you should understand it. But there's so many ways to learn. And I think people sometimes hold themselves back and use that extra degree or that extra qualification as an excuse to not pursue the thing that they want to pursue.
No, thanks for kind of hitting on that, because that is true. I know for myself, I thought I needed to go accumulate certifications and I wanted to get all these like hours in, all this stuff to rewrite my own narrative of not feeling qualified or not feeling competent. And I know there's plenty of people out here who don't have that and
Mhm.
are just kind of out there just doing the thing that they're passionate about doing and still like making an impact. And another thing that I wanted to get your thoughts on, because you talked about like some of this you just kind of have to have a level of faith, especially a level in faith in the unknown, especially when you're taking these leaps, you're taking these journeys into and steps into the unknown, because you never know what's quite on the other side. You know what you hope is and what you're hoping to find. So could you speak about the power for you of like just having faith in the process, having faith in the unknown, and how you've been able to like cultivate that in your journey?
Mm. Yeah. So I grew up in a religious household, so we always believed in God. And I remember growing up, my mom would always say, we didn't have like really fancy things. Like my mom was a single parent and immigrant, all that. And I remember her always being like, God's going to take care of us. And she would say it with so much confidence. And I'd be like, man, like, who is God and what is going on? God's just got it, God's handled it. But I think it's such a beautiful thing to be able to kind of let go, because what she was doing was she wasn't letting go of the responsibility that she had. She was letting go of her fear. And I think to understand that distinction is so important. So you're not, by having faith in something outside of yourself, you're not absolving yourself of the responsibility to do what you need to do for yourself. What you're doing is you're letting go of the fear that it might not work. You're letting go of that, again, another limiting belief of you're surrendering it to something that is bigger than you, greater than you, that's got you.
Sara, I love how you talked about how there's still responsibility and accountability in it. You have to do your part. Faith without works is dead. But letting go of the fear, because that fear is what trips so many people up. It holds so many people back. And I know this acronym of fear that always stands with me is like, fear is like false experiences appearing real. And a lot of times we will create a scenario, and it's like the furthest from what in reality tends to even happen. But that's what kind of keeps us stuck. And so being able to like tap into whatever people's source is, whatever their higher power is, can give you that strength to just lean in, and surely the steps and the things will start to unfold for yourself, and you kind of will see like the fruits of your labor truly do pay off.
Yeah.
So, another area that I wanted to just kind of pivot into, because we talked a lot about just your extensive background in working with organizations, I want to talk about just the workplace and mindset in the workplace, especially when it comes to leadership. And one of these really, I don't know, not taboo areas, but it's really one of these like elephant in the room areas, which is giving feedback. And you recently wrote an article about this, but I wanted to share is according to a survey published in Harvard Business Review, it showed that 44% of managers believe that giving critical feedback was stressful or difficult. And so I know you work with organizations, I know you work with leaders. And so I'm wanting to just hear from you your thoughts on why giving feedback, having that type of a conversation is so dreaded by both supervisors, but then also employees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it sucks to tell someone that they're not doing well or they're not meeting expectations, right? Like we are social creatures and we want connection and we want to feel like we belong and we want to have friends and we want to be liked. And both managers and their teammates, employees who are getting feedback or giving feedback, they're both kind of feeling the same fear of this. Think about your manager giving you feedback. It is not a comfortable experience to tell someone that, hey, like, you're not meeting expectations. It could result in you not being liked. It could result in this person not, including you in things. It could, it's just a very uncomfortable conversation, and it's unpredictable. And so I always tell leaders, I'm like, well, in what ways can we make this predictable? Right? I always tell the organizations that I work at, I'm like, when we get to that feedback conversation, it shouldn't be like a shocking surprise to someone that they're hearing this from you. So that ongoing feedback and that ongoing communication is so important.
I like what you're saying here too, of like, wow, how do we make this conversation predictable?
Mhm.
And we were just speaking about fear in one aspect of people like taking a leap of faith in kind of a personal endeavor, but then also this fear of the mind that we know exists in the workplace with so many difficult conversations that folks need to have, and that are really constructive and productive to have in the workplace. And so you gave some tips for the supervisor of how to give feedback. But what if you're the employee how do you receive feedback that actually can be beneficial to you? Like, what are some tips that you would offer to an employee of being on the receiving end of feedback and how they could kind of interpret it differently, but maybe not taking it personal? Any thoughts you would offer there?
Yeah. Yeah, I think here's one instance where that little critic inside your head, or the little the critical voice that we all kind of carry, you could actually make that work in your favor. And just it's through doing a self review. Look at what you've accomplished. Look at the ways in which you want to improve, and be in the driver's seat of that conversation. So it's a lot more comfortable for me if I go to my manager and go, "Hey, so I was thinking about my performance over the past 6 months, and here's an area where I actually really want to improve, and I want your feedback." And what that does is it puts you in the driver's seat. It makes the conversation more predictable. So you've prepared, you're asking your manager, you're soliciting feedback from your manager, and your manager is going to feel good about giving you that feedback. They're going to be like, oh, here's an area where you actually care about improving. And so it's a lot easier for me to tell you from my perspective what you're doing that might be hurting you or helping you. And so it just makes it a lot easier for both people.
Well, this is great too. What you're saying of like how this can be, there could be some empowerment in
Mhm.
that feedback conversation for the employee as well. And I love that. So much of this is about folks taking their power back because sometimes, to what you spoke of earlier, these labels that we put on ourselves, the imposter syndrome, we're giving our power away.
Mhm.
So because you come from an HR background, I've got to ask this because I feel like you'll have a lot of expertise here. So what about the conversation about, say, things you might need as an employee, compensation, sensitive conversations where it's like, oh, I don't know how to go about having this conversation with my supervisor about compensation, or feeling that like maybe there's more that I should be for whatever it is. Maybe it's the workload that I've been doing or projects I've been taking on. Like, any thoughts of how someone can come from a place of kind of like powerlessness, but also, I guess, tactfulness with
Mhm.
having that conversation? Is it something where like the performance review should be the first time they have that? Should there be some like lead up? Anything you can offer to help more employees feel like empowered about having that type of a critical conversation in the workplace? Because we know that could carry a lot of fear too. Like you were mentioning earlier, you don't know how it's going to be perceived or taken, but you also don't want to sit in silence and be kind of a victim of saying nothing if you feel like this is something that's like on your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I am a big fan of people advocating for themselves, and I'm a big fan of people feeling empowered to ask for what they want. You're never going to get anything if you don't try, if you don't ask for it, right? But there's a way to do it that, helps you not um, hurt your relationships at work. So I always tell people, go into that conversation very, very well prepared. So look at your company's policies and timelines. Most companies have like a time period in which they, promote people. Most companies have now in California, at least, you are able to get access to what the pay ranges are for your role or for your team, because of the pay transparency laws. So lots of states are moving in that direction. So that's very helpful. Do some market research, figure out what someone with your skill set, with your experience, and with the work that you're doing, what someone in that role might be making. And then go into it with kindness and understanding. I think that's the part. I think when people hear like advocate for myself, like all of a sudden it feels very like battle ready, like I'm going to go up against this person and they're going to like fight back. And it doesn't have to be that way, because if you go into a conversation ready to like go into like fight mode, you're probably going to show up in a way that isn't going to work for you. So know that you can advocate for yourself in an informed and compassionate way. So go into the meeting with data and be open to what your manager has to say, and know that you're putting your manager in a very awkward situation too. So be aware of that, right? Have that empathy, because a lot of the times your manager doesn't get to decide. As a manager, like, I would love to give everyone all the money, but that's not the reality of the situation. So there's processes, and there's HR, and there's finance, and there's budgets, and most companies plan for promotions and raises and the money attached to that a year ahead of time. That's how business works. And so I would always say, go into it with understanding and compassion, and know that it's an evolving situation. Compensation is evolving, right? So you can go into it and go, here's how much money I want. Or you can go, hey, I would really like to be making this much money. I would really like to be in this title, in this level. I want to have this title. The perception that creates for your manager is you are willing to come up with a plan with both of you to move into that direction so they can help you get there, as opposed to, people will go in and go, I think I'm underpaid. And immediately it's like, oh, okay, I have to immediately adjust this thing, right? So then people like go on high alert. And so I would just say compassion, empathy, and information for those conversations.
Yeah. No, thanks for like going on that journey to offer some insight, because I think it's really important, because we know that's just an area of sensitivity for so many people of like, well, how do you approach this? How do you do this in a thoughtful way? How do you do this in a way so that you don't feel like it's going to create any like damage or ripple effect to you, to your relationship with the person who maybe is in a position of power on you. So I love how you're saying like, be prepared, understand the other person's kind of side as well, and maybe it could be a co-created conversation that you can engage in with your manager to explore the realities, or at least explore creating some sort of plan towards it. And then if not, maybe there's some transparency that will allow that person to decide, okay, do they need to go into a different direction altogether?
Yeah.
That comes out of it. So our next portion is our each one teach one rapid fire questions. So I've got 4 questions for you. So are you ready for the first question?
Yeah, I think so. Sure.
Yeah, you better be, because it's coming anyway. So
let's do it.
Our first question for you, Sara, is what's one book or podcast that you'd recommend that's been a game changer for you in your journey?
Obviously, Living Once Twice with Justin Oliver. Obviously.
I appreciate you so much.
I think a really good book that I read recently, well, not recently, a while ago, was Atomic Habits. It's like, I think a lot of people have read it, but it's like the psychology behind habit building, and I think it's a great book. Highly recommend it.
No, that's a classic. That's a classic. So I love the podcast recommendation, and I also love the book recommendation. So the next one is, what's one habit or practice that has been impactful for you in your lifestyle design?
Meditation. I know everyone probably says that, but truly, like, I think just being able to silence your mind and sit in stillness, and I think it's extremely healthy for you. I think it's been very helpful for me to find balance.
And I can hear people say like, well, how do you meditate, Sara? Is it 10 minutes? Is it 5 minutes? Like, what does your practice look like?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I have been meditating for a very long time, pretty much since I was like 17. And so yes, my meditation practice is very developed. I guess I can do it with ease. But people ask me this all the time. They're like, how do I start meditating? And I love it when people are like, oh yeah, just sit in silence for 5 minutes. And I'm like, do you know how long 5 minutes is when you're sitting quietly? Like, that's a long time. So I always tell people, start small. Set a timer for like 30 seconds or 45 seconds. That doesn't seem like a long time, but it will be. And try that, and then build from there, build your way up to, that 5 minutes.
No, I love that. You're right. 5 minutes. It can take a long time for the mind to silence and kind of quiet itself, and there's still trains moving through the mind, trains of thought moving through the mind. So I think you just let people know, like, just start where you are, and you can kind of build up from there.
Yeah.
So the next question for you is, what's a law or a policy that you would make that everyone would need to abide by?
What's a law or a policy? Oh my gosh. Like, just be nice, like, be kind, be compassionate. I don't know how we get there, but that should be a law. That should absolutely be a law.
That's kind of going back to what is it, like the golden rule, the platinum rule, treating people how you'd want to be treated or how they want to be treated. So that never goes out of style.
Yeah.
So the next one and last one is, since this season's all about personal transformation and letting go of what no longer serves us, what's one limiting belief about yourself that you needed to let go of in order for you to become who you are today?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. There have been so many. A limiting belief about myself. I think it has to do with whether I can be successful. I do hypnotherapy, and I this was a time when I had my instructor do this for me, and we really explored what success means to me and why I'm so afraid of it. And so initially, when I spoke to her, she, with any hypnotherapy session, your hypnotherapist will ask you kind of what you want to work on. So my instructor was like, "What do you want to work on?" And I was like, "Well, I think something having to do with success. I don't know. This was a while ago. I said this." And she goes, "Well, why do you feel like you can't be successful?" And this is me thinking with my logical thinking brain. Or no, what she asked me was, "What would happen if you became successful?" That's what she asked me. Logical thinking brain. I'm like, "Oh yeah, like it would be so much fun. Like I'd have like a blast, obviously." And I would feel really good about myself, all these things, right? And then she put me in this in the hypnotic state, the trance state, and she asked me the same question, and Justin, the answer that I gave was so different and so scary and so rooted in a childhood belief that I held, or somehow this idea that formed in my mind. And I was shocked because, when you're in that state, you know what's happening. And when I gave that answer, like I came back and I just had like a moment of silence. And she was like, "So?" And I was like, "I don't even know how to process this right now, because the answer that I'm telling myself of how I'm going to feel when I'm successful, logically, is so different than the answer that's so deep within me of how I might feel when I become successful."
Thank you for touching on all of that and really kind of going there and being so open to just kind of be vulnerable. If you don't mind, you just kind of hit on, like, we talked a little bit in your intro about, like, you are a hypnotherapist.
Mhm.
Is there any misconception you want to just share about hypnotherapy? Because some people may be like intrigued by it, interested by it, but I know there could be some myths, some misconceptions. I mean, they're hearing you say that you were in a trance state, and
Yeah.
we might think of what we see in a movie. So, do you just mind sharing a little bit about kind of like what actually is like happens in a hypnotherapy session, just for folks who may be kind of like on the outside looking in?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I know it can sound very scary, but it's not. It's really not. Justin, have you ever been hypnotized?
I have not.
Ah, okay.
I have not. That's definitely on my list,
Okay.
but I think it's because of the misconception I have about it is why I've been a little hesitant.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the misconception there is like people think that they're out of control, like they don't control their body or whatever. But all hypnosis is self hypnosis. The facilitator, the person that's hypnotizing you, is just facilitating an experience for you. And so when I say a trance state, what I'm saying is a deeply relaxed state where your whole body is very relaxed and you kind of shut off what I call the overthinking brain, but like you kind of like tell it to like chill for a second. So you can dig into like these limiting beliefs that we've been talking about, these things that are wired so deeply within us, these ideas and these frameworks and whatnot. So when I say trance state, that's what I mean. I mean just a very deeply relaxed state. If we're thinking about like brain waves, you're in a theta brainwave state, which is a very common, brainwave state that we go into naturally. We naturally go into this state throughout our day. We naturally are in the state at night while we're sleeping. And so it's a common experience that we all feel, but I think because of stage hypnosis, people are scared of it. But you are not out of control. You can come out. You can't be hypnotized to do anything that you don't want to do. You can't be, you can't get stuck in a state of hypnosis. You are in control the whole time. It's a state of focused attention and deep relaxation, and you can actually come back out of it at any time I'm just saying words and you are creating images and visualization in your mind. And so you're in that driver's seat. You're in control the entire time.
Thank you for addressing that, because I know like movies and everything else kind of can like create this huge other image of it, but what you just shared there I think is really helpful for folks who maybe are just curious to hear more and learn more, and maybe take advantage of it. So someday if I ever try, I'll have to like keep you posted, but that's definitely helpful to know. So, but the last question for you, Sara, is like, what's next for you, and where can people go to learn more about you, learn more about all the work you do, the coaching practice and everything?
Yeah. So you can find out more about me and my services at avracoaching.com, AVRA coaching.com. I have an Instagram account, which I feel so bad about, but I haven't really posted a lot on recently, but I will get back to it. I post a lot of these resources, a lot of tips on there, a lot of tools similar to the stuff that we've been talking about today. And that's at avra.coaching. And yeah, I think that's it.
Oh, so humble you. But look, stay tuned, y'all. Definitely be sure to check out all of the amazing stuff that Sara's got going on. Because Sara, as I mentioned earlier on, like I feel so grateful to be in community with you, all the incredible things that you're doing, the way that you're just showing up and servicing the world. And thanks for all the insights you gave today of helping people to uncode this whole thought that they might have of like, that can't be me. I can't do what she's doing or what they're doing in the world. I can't leave my corporate job or whatever it might be. But you showing people some practical steps that they could do to explore and maybe reignite what they have been suppressing, what they have been ignoring, and getting back to themselves. But then some of the practical steps that they could take if indeed dipping their toe into starting their own practice might be of interest to them, or whatever it is that really like lights their fire. Just showing up there as a way back to experiencing some of those core pillars of peace, of bliss, of joy, of freedom that we all deserve. So just thank you again for your time and all you offer.
Of course, anyone can do what I'm doing. Anyone can do what I'm doing and so much more. So I fully believe that. Thank you, Justin, for everything that you do to remind people of this.
We're all just trying to do our part in the world. So this is kind of one of the great things I appreciate when I get to bring on folks, especially the folks who are close to me and who inspire me and motivate me. And I get to kind of just share that with the listeners and audience. So folks, that is it for today's show. Thank you all for your presence and tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to show your support by sharing the Living Once Twice podcast on Instagram, LinkedIn, also leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and checking out the YouTube channel. And again, if you haven't already, be sure to give us a follow at Living Once Twice on Instagram, reaching out to you all through the time and the space that separates us to say, remember, your dream life is waiting for you. It's time to go for it. You deserve it. Catch you later on Living Once Twice.